Sue here with you in Fans of the Framework. Today we are going to talk about staffing, turnover and staffing problems, and what to do about it. So here we go. I want to start with a concept that we talk about a lot, which is supply and demand. So in an organization, when you're staffing, there's this basic equation that the supply of staff you have and their competencies and the demand for the volumes and complexity of services, that this supply and demand needs to be in balance. And the more it is in balance, supply equals demand, then the more likely you're going to have better results. A better employee experience, a better patient experience, high quality safety, even finance, as far as productivity and things like that. So when you are in balance, supply equals demand, and the more often you're in balance, then the better results and the less stress there is on the system. And so what's happened here with the pandemic, which is, basically a crisis and a crisis response, is that oftentimes when an organization is faced with a crisis, or an individual department or team is faced with a crisis that either increases that demand or the complexity of that demand, or decreasing the availability of staff, etc. When there is this crisis, usually there's this, immediate pulling together response where people come together for that short term and really just, do what they need to do to balance that supply demand equation. So that's like a surge impact. But now what we're seeing with the pandemic is that this crisis is long term. So that immediate usual response that happens in organizations or a department or within a team or part of an organization is being stressed long term. And there's a high likelihood that that stress is on top of what might have already been a not so good system or process for making sure that you're in balanced supply and demand. So we've got, the immediate crisis of dealing with just, staffing the shift or the day or the week. And, really what needs to happen in parallel to that is a a process, a system, sophistication around risk avoidance, or mitigating the fact that this is going to happen, and having this good long-term plan for making sure that any day-to-day crisis or situation can easily be resolved. So what we recommend is that, while there needs to be this immediate response, and your organization, your department, your team needs to have this immediate response, and you have to deal with the day-to-day crisis of staffing and making sure supply equals demand, what you also need to be doing in parallel to that is fixing the systems, creating the culture, developing the sophistication and the ways in which you can avoid being in crisis in the future. So let's think about it by way of like your health, right? So let's say you're in a health crisis, and you need to do what you immediately need to do to address that crisis, right? So whether that's going to the ER, going to your doctor, or whatever, you need to fix that crisis, right? So you've got this immediate need or crisis with your health. But if you don't fix the underlying causation or the systems or structures that support your health, then you're going to find yourself in crisis again and again and again and again, right? Because you're not fixing those underlying causes. This can happen, by way of another personal example, personal finances, right? So you get yourself in a financial crisis, maybe you get yourself out of it by working extra hours or getting a loan or whatever. So you get yourself out of it, but if you don't fix the underlying cause of what systems or issues are broken, then what happens is you find yourself there again and again and again. So if we're only fixated on the immediate response, the immediate crisis, just firefighting in the moment to fix, for instance, the staffing problem or the turnover problem, or the demand or complexity is, outpacing your supply, if you're just dealing with crisis mode and band-aiding and whatever to get through the crisis, And not in parallel to that, identifying what is the causation, right? What are the potential things that can build us into a future state where even a crisis like a pandemic is likely not going to overwhelm our ability to deal with it, right? And so organizations are faced with this right now, that while they're in immediate crisis mode, they likely also need to be in proactive problem solving, long-term fix mode for things like turnover, their workplace culture, the attractiveness of their place, right? For people to stay with them and to want to join them, right? And so one of the premises that we would bring into this is this concept that we teach often, which is do it with them, not to them. So, as leaders, for instance, in organizations, we're outnumbered by our staff, right? There's way more staff than there are of us as leaders. And so, can we on our own as leaders fix this crisis in the short term? And can we fix it in the long term? And the fact of the matter is that it will work better in the short-term fixes as well as the long-term fixes if we can engage our employees and do it with them, not to them. So really becoming an attractive organization that retains people and also recruits people is something that leaders can partner with employees on to be able to make that happen, okay? So, I'll remember a situation in my leadership where we had a dialysis unit and we had a 40% vacancy rate, right? And you can't just stop serving your dialysis patients. They need this, treatment 3 times a week, etc. And the nearest close they could go is 90 miles down the road, and they're already at capacity with their ability to serve their local community. So like we have to figure this out, right? We can't just, wait and just downsize our demand. It's there. We've got to serve these people. And so we had to fix this problem of having a 40% vacancy rate. And so we had to get into that immediate crisis mode of what are we going to do about it, because we can't cancel dialysis treatments. We got the show has to go on. These people need their dialysis, but what can we do? And so we pulled together a group of the employees from that unit, right? And then some other people from within the organization, like HR and other departments where they had some cross-trained staff or whatever. And we came up with a short-term crisis mitigation plan. And the staff had some of the best ideas for making that happen, right? So as leaders, this problem impacts you, and this problem impacts your employees, and it impacts your patients. And so pulling your employees together and really deference to expertise and problem solving around the immediate crisis will come up with better ideas, and there'll be ownership for the staff in helping to execute that crisis plan.